A new era is upon us. Pulse has taken the world by storm as the leading Web3 social media. Beyond current features like casting, tipping, inscription trading, and earning, it's now elevating to the next level. A new era is upon us. Pulse has taken the world by storm as the leading Web3 social media. Beyond current features like casting, tipping, inscription trading, and earning, it's now elevating to the next level on-chain.
Soil, a fully regulated, seamless link between traditional finance and the digital crypto world, offering secure returns fully backed by tangible, real-world assets.
The Credify testnet is live, so head on over to demo.credify.finance to see how you can effortlessly experiment with autonomous earning, NFT corporate bonds, Credi and X-Credi utilities, and Module X.
Good afternoon, everyone. BC Richfield here, coming to you live from London. It's just gone a couple of minutes past midday here, making it just a couple of minutes past 1100 UTC. Big shout out to everybody joining us live on stream today, as well as everybody watching this on catch up. Special mention, Geo first in this morning. Great to see you there, mate. Nit, Erica, Rafael, and everybody else. Got a lot of people kind of pouring in at the moment. So good morning and happy Monday to everyone. So we're going to have our focus around kind of Bitcoin today, look at Ethereum as well. Back after the half term, brilliantly. I think a lot of people trying to find a bit more normality after the kids have been off for school. So yeah, we're going to take a look at Bitcoin today, take a look at how our kind of analysis has been playing out. And I think with a real focus on kind of how we can make this into some actionable plays. Okay. So for me, something that's really important that we've got on here. So first of all, this is all TA that we share with the members over at the Bird Nest every week. We get every team member does a report daily to keep everybody in tune with the markets, and I then share at least one of the time frames for that on Twitter, and also do some kind of unique content for our family over at Femex as well. So if you're interested in any of that, please, you can find that all in the description. Do come and join us over at Femex Pulse, by the way, guys. Amazing exchange, and you're just, every time you interact on there, you like comments, you share posts, you do whatever, it rewards you for learning in their native token, and that ultimately all is convertible into USDT. Chill out. Hello, my friend Simon as well. What was that? ENA. Okay, mate, let's have a look. Yeah, we'll see if we've got some time for that. We'll obviously focus our Wednesday session a little bit more on kind of alt requests and bits, but let's see where we are, because actually when we look at this on a weekly scale, right, we had the previous all-time high back here, which is sat on Femex at 69,000 flat. That was obviously all the way back in November 2021. Okay, so when we look at what's happened with that, why was this such a key level? Well, all-time highs are always there, obviously, to be respected, but also to see how price action engages with them, right? Helps us build a picture of whether price is ready to gain acceptance over that level or whether it's not. Now, what we can see here, if we look at the previous all-time high, and for that I'm talking about the one back here in April 21, I'm just going to draw this line across and make it a bit thicker like the last one. Now, looking at how price engaged with this, right, we got this initial rejection. What happens when we see this? We see external liquidity taken, and then price often looks to rebalance a gap. Yeah, fair value gap. Here we see we got this initial bounce. What happened? We came and took liquidity above this high. Notice how when we set this high, price fails to close above it. We set this high. What happens? Price fails to close above it again. Then when we come back down below and violate this fair value gap, it's the first kind of real sign of weakness that we see. And then our expectation is for price to seek liquidity lower down. So when we compare that here with what we currently got, although we had a little bit of more of a kind of protracted attempt to overcome this, we've been fueled by the ETF news, for example, as well as other fundamental factors, but fundamental and news factors are always in the market. Okay. So really, we obviously always want to account for them, but at the same time, we want to see how that kind of translates also to what's on the charts. So we can see over here, again, we had this deviation, price kind of rejected here, comes back underneath. Now, this was a bit of a sneaky move here because we saw this rejection and we saw this nice bullish candle. Now, I know it's a bearish color. These would be red on most people's charts, right? But the long downside wick and the fact that we finished as like a bullish hammer candle or a pin bar with a short nose, followed by an engulfing candle, really did, had me thinking as well that we were going to come and kind of make a move on this high. Now, ultimately, we didn't do that. Price broke down. And then when we came back under this level again, we can see its significance here. Once we close below, that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're now in our 8th week of attempting to get and close back above that line there. Now, from a liquidity perspective, we're starting to build some interesting targets up here, right? We have this high here, we have this untapped high here, and now we have this one here. These areas really do like to be run by price. So we can see, where the attraction is there for a price to keep moving higher. Now, from a technical standpoint, price is very, very healthy on the weekly scale, right? We've had the large expansion move, this impulse move here. We then rejected this high, which is absolutely fine and really, really healthy for price action, right? We've then come back down and now we've rebalanced, or not rebalanced it, but we have come down, engaged with this gap here, right? So to rebalance it fully, you would see price, come all the way down to here. If we close below it, it would be an inversion. We would then see that as a sign of weakness. No sign of that there. We basically came into this very shallow, really respected the equilibrium of this, which is the 50% of the gap. And then again, nice bullish hammer candle here, and price then moved up. So the only thing really that I really wanted to see from last week and the week before that we didn't get is price closing back above this level at 69k. Now, however, we look to have started the week very strongly. Okay, last week was a little bit indecisive. For anybody out there that trades patterns, we also have our inside bar pattern here as well. Okay, so mother bar high and mother bar low, which is this larger candle here. And then sat within that, upon the close of last week's candle, we now have an inside bar candle here, right? Meaning that this kind of makes up a range. Yeah. So as we look at this here, we have range low and range high, the mother bar candle, range higher and range low of the inside bar candle. So at the moment, this doesn't really tell us too much because price is basically right at the middle. It's right at the equilibrium. What you want to see with this type of pattern is price running lows or highs and then looking for acceptance or rejection. Okay. So just to kind of point that out, because I do think that that's quite interesting. All right, so clean that up. So how do we start the week? Well, look, we're bullish on a weekly scale. We have to retain that bullish bias. So the expectation is for price to reach higher. Doesn't mean that we just kind of blindly jump into longs, etc. All right, but it does mean that that has to factor into our thinking. Now, if we move down to the daily, what I found really interesting here, and as I released in the Bitcoin report last night for the Bird Nest, hey Seb, how you doing, mate? Chill out. Yes, but I will try and make time to look at that at the end. We're finishing the show about 12:30. So once I ripped through this and ETH, then I did make a promise that I'd take a look at ENA for Simon as well. So if we can, mate, we will get them in. So I'll just hop down that just in case and ship it. So what was really interesting about this, right? We've got our 69k level on here, and look, almost kind of like a point of control. You see the amount of price action that kind of sticks to this level, right? But I'm just going to hide that for a moment, just so that we can really, really like seeing the charts as clean as we possibly can, right? So when we're looking at this now, we can see our clear liquidity targets marked out. We've got the daily highs, the weekly highs still on the chart. We now have the dailies as well. This was the key area of interest for me, was this fair value gap, right? Because as we know, or maybe you don't, but with fair value gaps, what we're expecting is if they're respected, or while they're respected, like this one is here, all right, then we see price take a high here. It then corrects back down. We look for ideally a 50% retracement here or slightly deeper. And then it rebalances the gap here. And then we expect continuation, right? So we're bullish when we're down here. Now, if we invert these gaps, right, like happened here, then you'll see these as purple on the chart, okay? And that's this. You see this bearish gap here. The expectation was that price would come down here, meet the bearish gap here and reject lower, right? Just as price action's done previously. However, when we have this strong close through it, it's a sign that price is seeking liquidity higher up, and ultimately we then target the next swing higher. Okay, so when price is up here, we get the rejection, the failure to close above. What do we look for here? And then we look for price to come down find a bullish gap, which we've got here, and then we get continuation. Okay, so when we look at this, we had that strong close and price ran up here. So why is that of interest, and why am I kind of going on about that? Because we've got a very similar situation here, right? Price has come up, taken liquidity. It's now moved down, looking for support within this fair value gap. And what we can see is we rebalanced it straight away, but closed back within it. So remember, we don't mind seeing the wicks come through. As long as the body closes back within, then, that's not an inversion. Well, we need to close below it. So what I said in the report last night was why I wasn't really too trusting of this, right? So yes, we did invert this, but there's very often nuance to these things as well, right? And this is where experience comes in, and chart time plays such a massive factor, right? Because you need that for consistency. Look at the difference here between this close, right? And let me just draw this one back in for you guys as well, and this one, right? Look at that body. Right, look at the way the candle, just the aggression of that move, the energy, the momentum in that move. Now, you look at this, look, very, very a slither of a body close, and that huge downside wick, right, which is actually longer than the upside wick, telling me that there's buyers that have stepped in there, right, or that the market isn't quite ready to seek out that liquidity lower. So what I wanted to see last night, all right, so here we've got Sunday's candle, and I said, what would make me bullish coming into this morning is this. I'm just going to do that a bit thinner, right, so you guys can see it really clearly. Is this candle's body closing above this candle's body, meaning that we would look for this to be strong. It's closed back within the gap. Look, sometimes you need to kind of step away from overthinking things, or I know that I need to remind myself to do that, right? Because within here you can just kind of think about things too much. Look, if price was really ready to drop here, right, in the same way, again, when we expanded above here, look at the expansion that then took place, taking out this high, right? It really aggressively kind of seek that out. So as we've got here, prices close below, closes back in, closes above the prior day's high here, showing a bit of strength. No, it's not the strongest candle in the world. It's not. But the fact that we closed back within this range tells me that price wanted a little bit higher. Now, as we break this down onto the 4 hour, good morning, Carlo. It's actually BC Richfield here on behalf of the Bird Nest, but good morning and very welcome to the show. So I'm going to get rid of that now, and we can see then how we've had this real start. Obviously, late tonight, we've got Asia, had a really aggressive expansion here in London as well. So it just makes me then turn and say, okay, well, where we want to align these with correlated asset classes, I'm looking towards the NASDAQ especially, but also the S&P 500. And in an ideal world, you want to see a kind of inactive, flat or weak dollar index. Okay, so as we look at this here, we can see, okay, on a 4 hour scale, but this is a really key level up here. Let me just get rid of the session breaks a second to make that clearer for you guys. This is a really key level up here, right? Again, we can see the deviation. Price gets below this, fails to get acceptance above. While price kind of has this sell-off, is really good news for risk assets. Crypto is indeed a risk asset. Now, when we look across at the NASDAQ, for example, right, and you have to forgive the stuff, this is my trading chart, so you can see there's a lot of TA on here, but look how we've had that real kind of strength. We're now coming up and engaging with a daily fair value gap, right? So what we want to see with this are the same principles that we've talked about before. We want to see price have a strong close through here, but risk markets are looking strong to start off the week. So where does that leave us in terms of when we move over to Ethereum? Okay, so in fact, let's take a look on here. And we want to kind of get ourselves to a slightly higher time frame first of all. Just pop some of these off for a second. Okay, so let's start with a nice clean chart and let's kind of zoom out here to the weekly. So obviously ETH looking super strong last week. Week before was just absolutely monster. So there was no real major surprise that price action kind of chilled out a little bit, all right, last week. So you have huge expansions like this, and then quite often you see a period of consolidation. What I do like about this is the weekly close here which has left us this nice weekly gap underneath. Now with these, obviously, our expectation is for price to kind of get drawn down into these, right? So we would be looking for something like this, price to come into this, and then for continuation. Now, obviously, on a weekly scale, what's quite tricky about this is we would require a close all the way below this to invalidate it. So we need to keep that in mind. However, that's why we kind of always break down on a triple screen system, in this case, from kind of our weekly to our 4 hour to our 15-minute, to make sure we've kind of got the most accurate view available to us. So that's where we are on a weekly scale. Obviously, very, very difficult to fade this. That week, we swept the liquidity above the prior week's high and then ultimately kind of consolidated here. So this week's going to be interesting. I would like to see price kind of pull back into the gap a little bit, often kind of clears the market out a little bit, allows other participants to get involved a bit lower down. However, obviously with crypto, especially if it gets particularly hot and it gets a lot of interest, then it can run incredibly quickly. So we want to kind of be prepared to trade this both ways. Now, I'm not bearish in any way on this. When you look at the weekly, right, and you look at the daily now as well, higher lows, being set here, it now looks like it's kind of ready to go again. The reason that I would have liked to have seen a deeper kind of corrective move here based on a weekly is because it would just kind of gives the market a chance to cool off, allows things to reset, clears out some leverage, and then, price can move up. So looking at this for more context, we don't really have any gaps here to fill, right? Price action through here is very efficient. So what I want to look for here is for price to close above this. Okay, typically when you see this, we've got good examples of it here, right? So down close candle here, what do we get? Price closes above, showing us strength. It then targets the next form of liquidity higher up. So we would call that, or certainly for any ICT students, we'd call that a change in state of delivery, or we would look at that as a new order block being set here, okay? So at the moment, it's a little bit tricky. I would kind of be favoring bullish, especially with the market conditions in the term that they are, with risk markets and equities being strong as well. But it's one of those where, you want to wait and make sure that you're taking high probability trade setups. So while I'm on here and I'm asking myself what price has most recently done, well, for me, price has most recently swept this higher. All right, so we're now kind of seeing a corrective move back down from that. We can look at this very kind of small price leg that we've got here. Yeah, and then maybe we're looking now for price to come back down. And as we've looked at here on a higher time frame, if we're looking for this to confirm the order block here, these consecutive down close candles, price has now closed above, taken liquidity. It'd be nice to see price kind of hold this level here, maybe dip down just below this 50%. All right, and then for continuation higher. What I really like about this on the daily, again, is we can just see the cluster of liquidity forming above these untapped highs, right? They very, very often draw price higher or lower, obviously, if we have them to the downside as well. And, we never ever want to kind of get married to our biases the same. We don't want to impose our will on the market. We want to kind of look and make sure we've got, or I want to look and make sure I've got plans to trade it both ways. So considering the liquidity we just marked to the upside, well, there's also some pretty tempting untapped liquidity to the lows down here as well. So that's where price kind of is at the moment, especially on something like ETH that's obviously run incredibly hot. It feels like we could see that corrective move lower, but at the same time, this thing could really pop. So if that's the case, then I can move down to the lower time frames here, and I would look to trade it in terms of liquidity, right? Now, what you'll notice here are the red boxes. They represent Asia's range, all right? So what we're looking for here is typically when we take a key liquidity pool like this, and then we combine that as we had here with our 4 hour, our daily levels, the swing highs, also equal highs up here, which are very, very important. We can see price ran them, and now we've corrected lower. So we can say to ourselves, well, look, if we're expecting price to move higher, just as we did on the higher time frames, what we really want to see are areas that should be bearish. So at the moment, this is a bearish gap, and we're saying to ourselves, as we've done here, right? Price sold off down to here, took liquidity below the lows. Then what happened? Price then came back, yeah, engaged with this gap and sold off. Where to? Attacking liquidity below these lows. So now we're over here, we're saying to ourselves, okay, well, if we now see this closed above, that can be the first sign of strength here. And then we can see we've got highs here, we've got a gap here, and we've got highs resting up here. All of those are going to provide a draw on liquidity. So, you know, we can break that down to the smaller time frames. Obviously, we just need to appreciate that the lower the time frame, the more the noise. But that's how I'd be looking to trade that on ETH today. So unless you've got any questions on those, guys, if you have, I'm happy to circle back to them. And what I'll do is I'll close up by quickly running through ENA, FET, and SHIB as well. Oh, okay, let's have a look. Simon, here's a wormhole W from your review. Last week played out quite well. However, return was not as high as it should be. I think the market's still showing weakness for altcoins. Yeah, I think that's a good observation. I think we haven't seen the altcoins pop up, especially a lot of the legacy coins, you know, the real OGs in the space, your Litecoins, etc. This cycle does seem to be a little bit different. You know, the meme coins really kind of front run everything, didn't they? Which is interesting because those type of assets are normally some of the last ones you get to see. So let's zoom ourselves out, right? And then let's take a look, shall we, at ENA. Take a look at this one over here. There's not much more, is there? It's interesting, right? So I think let's look at a spot contract for this, right? We don't have tons of history on this. Okay, so obviously it depends if you're futures trading and make sure you're using the futures contract. If you're looking at this from a spot perspective, which I assume is probably a little bit more the case rather than the futures element, then, you know, use the spot contract to look at that. Now on a weekly, you know, we don't have a ton of information here, but again, what we just ask ourselves, okay, what has price done? What is price doing? So price swept this low. And delivering, well, not delivering quite from a gap, but this fast move up. You see this area held here. And then this bullish reaction here, again, change of state of delivery when price closes above this, would say to me that that's the most probable or most likely target for price at that point. Now, on the close of this candle, however, we then get this high here, which we've now swept. So we want to drop down to a daily scale, yeah, and we can see that we've only just taken that. So this morning, if you were a trader in Asia, for example, you can be pretty confident that that's the draw up. Now we've taken that, we kind of really want to see how price is going to react to it. So we want to see that kind of strong close above, obviously appreciating that this high is quite close by, and also the fact that it's an intermediate term high, meaning that it's resting within a bearish gap. Look, we can see that that's got precedent because it's already rejected price once. So this, for me, would be a really interesting line in the sand on a daily scale. You'd want to see price close above this, and then I think we could really start to see it fly. We've got this swing high here. You've got relative equal highs here, and then obviously ultimately the all-time high over here. So on a daily scale, that's quite clean, actually. Again, you can see how it respects the structure here, breaks down with displacement, meaning we leave this gap, price returns up, rebalances this, breaks down again, takes the low. And I know I sound like a broken record with this, but it's just, you know, always something to be aware of, and that I have a lot of interest in is when we look at these inversions, how often these capture the key reversals within the market, all right? So again, bearish, meaning that we would expect price to return to this and see an initial rejection, seeking out liquidity lower. But again, look at that strong body close through it. What does that then tell us? Well, it tells us that price is then seeking liquidity higher, which we start with by focusing on the next swing higher, right? Price then corrects back down lower, finds support at this inversion, and is now making a move on liquidity higher up. So on a daily scale, you know, we're still obviously very bullish here. We've got bullish market structure. We can see where the draw on liquidity is higher up as well. We're getting quite close to a point that we could see certainly an initial rejection, or a point at which, if we do see, you know, crypto breakdown further, then it's probably going to be from around here. So again, treacherous to be kind of longing up into this, right? You can certainly on an intraday basis. We will look at the 4 hour very quickly in a moment as well. You'd want to see a close above this to move on towards targets like this swing high, which is sat over here at 0.969. Oh, no, so it's not 1.121. So, okay, looking at this now on the 4 hour, again, just it's showing a lot of kind of strength taking off from here, right? So had that beautiful kind of consolidation. Even then, price was kind of grinding up over the weekend and got a nice consolidation, and now price is really starting to pop. So just taking a look at this, yeah, this is good. More upside on the equity markets, especially on the NASDAQ, which we're interested in because that's the most technology heavy set. So that kind of aligns itself with crypto more necessarily than the others. And then we're seeing weakness here in the dollar index as well, right? So that's really, really interesting. You're very welcome, Carlo. So what does that mean from here? Well, look, I'm bullish on it. It just means that if I want to start chasing these things into higher targets, right, this isn't the place to be longing it. What you really want to see here is some kind of correction down lower for liquidity to be swept and then to make a move on that. All right. So that's certainly what I'd be looking for. Very similar kind of move to this. We kind of took out Asia's higher this morning, and then we beautifully stepped down into this gap here to rebalance when right at the start of the London trading session. We've now had that expansion. So London certainly got the drop on us in a lot of these moves this morning, but we also need to be careful, you know, when you see kind of consolidate, when you see continuation through Asia into London, often you can get some kind of New York session reversals. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. So let's just take a look at two more then before we shut up shop for the day. Let's take a look at FET as well. And actually, I know, again, guys, you're probably looking at these a little bit more on from a spot nature. All right, so let's take a look at it on the spot markets for you. Probably should have held from whenever we did this piece of TA, right? But same principles, high time frames, holding key gaps, right? You can see even through this one, before the gaps had boxes and were a lot darker on the charts. Look how, again, we had an inversion in here. Price just held this level beautifully, that kind of rounded bottom, and then price really took off. So where are we at the moment? Well, on a weekly scale, the first thing that stands out to me is, again, we've got key liquidity resting above these untapped highs, but we also have the same below, you know, three really well presented untapped lows here as well. So what has price most recently done? Well, price has most recently changed its state of delivery here to a continuation of bearish, and the last liquidity that we swept was on the upside. Okay, so we've swept liquidity from the highs and we've now corrected down a little bit lower. So I definitely want to get a bit more granular on this. Okay, again, we can see this nice liquidity building kind of both sides of the market here. Again, efficient price action on the way down here. Okay, so if I was looking at this here and saying, okay, if we had this last kind of down candle, you know, this last down candle here, which you'd be seeing out as your order block, is basically controlling this whole area, right? So I think you start closing below that, and again, you know, we're a long way off of that at the moment, then you could be in a little bit of trouble. I quite like the AI coins at the moment. I feel like they've kind of taken a reasonable hit recently, but obviously the narrative is so strong, everything that came out with NVIDIA. So I think, you know, and that, for example, is really kind of making the NASDAQ fly. So we can see how that kind of positivity can creep back into crypto. Now, what would I want to see here on a daily scale? Well, even on a daily scale, this is quite tricky here. I would say that if we look, probably because we don't have any inefficiencies in the move, meaning we don't have any gaps, and also for price to change its state of delivery, we'd need to close above this, right? All the way up here. So I think that's a little bit tricky in itself because these are all consecutive down close candles. Something that I do often like to check is when you have like a key low like this. I mean, these were like relative equal lows here as well. These can often provide like a really interesting line in the sand. All right. So, and then as it goes below, you see it gets bought, and then it closes below, and then ultimately it finds that weakness. So I'd quite like to see this level close back above here. It's 2.1649, and then, you know, continuation beyond that. But do take a look at that prior kind of key swing low, right? Price really kind of dips below. We get back above this, I feel like these things could really start to pop. Right? So let's take a look where we are on the 4 hour. Okay, 4 hour for me here is just beautifully lined up, right? So we've got that level that we want to see the close above. If we want to start taking more aggressive positions here, then what we want to do is we want to see this fair value gap closed above, right? Because again, look, rejection, price seeks liquidity lower. What then happens, and what do we see in so many of these reversal points, is if we close above this, then this becomes an inversion, which you would see as an FVGI. So you normally see them as that on my chart, okay? And then we can see here, look, all of a sudden now, untapped high, untapped high, untapped high, untapped high, untapped high, beautiful gap here, hosting that high. You can see and you can really kind of feel the draw and liquidity higher. So I really do think these things could run. I think a lot of the AI coins look like FET at the moment. So that's a really interesting one. That's certainly where my thought process will be on that. Now, SHIB. Let's take a look at SHIB as well, shall we? Okay, so again, we see that monster just run when, meme coins just really just set the tone for this massive move. But then again, look, it's following very good technicals for us here. Okay, so we've come up, what have we done? Really blitzed up, cracked up above this high here, saw a big rejection. What's happened? Price has come back down to rebalance this gap here. If we take the move from this to the low to the high, you can see this is in the lower 50%. Yeah, meaning that we're down here in discount, meaning that this can represent a good buy for investors at that level, right? Good risk to reward. We've seen a big pop off on it. If these bullish conditions are to continue, then typically you want to be a buyer below that kind of 50%. So with that in mind, let's kind of flick ourselves down to the daily and see what we've got here. See, again, liquidity targets both up and down. Actually, these here are really starting to build some nice liquidity. You can often see, in a bullish scenario, certainly price dip down into these before really taking off. But what I like about this here is if we're again telling our story of price, we can see that price swept this low. That's a nice reaction. See the way price comes and closes back above here, right? Look at this low, and this low was swept, right? See that shallow sweep, price recovers very quickly, ultimately leads to some more bullish price action. So this is what we'd like to see here in terms of our draw on liquidity, or where, what can be drawing price higher is this bearish gap. So, super conservative investment style. If you closed above that, that could be a go signal for more upside. But ultimately, I think at the moment, when we look at that, there's a very, very thin gap here as well. That nice reaction down here has me feeling bullish that price would be at least looking to kind of correct up to the kind of 50% of this range here, which is, just above this gap. So I think that provides a really strong correlation to why price could be looking for some more upside here. Now what we can see, and I get really excited by this, right, is if we've got equal highs, and these are 3 exactly equal highs, perfect equal highs, from a market making perspective, bits and pieces, or from a liquidity perspective, these, are often seen as like engineered liquidity, right? So they're, price draws towards them like an absolute magnet. Now, would it be nice if we'd had some kind of gapping in here that we could have looked for? So the key thing we would have to look for here is for this to be closed above on a 4-hour scale. As we discussed recently, that would be our change in state of delivery. So what would be lovely is to get this close here. We've got it in about 26 minutes. Then in about 30 minutes after that, we step into the New York AM session, right? When the New York market wakes up and you get that huge injection of volatility into the market. If we get that close above it, I'd be looking in here on the lower time frames for some long setups, at least to these equal highs. But I do feel like we can start running some of these levels up here as well, all right? And yeah, you know what, Carlo? Bless you, you did ask so politely. This is going to be our last one, though. So let's take a look at NOT. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, yeah, so good spot here from Kai saying this is a super bullish, which it is. Yeah, this was looking a little bit rough, but often when these projects launch, right, you get those big kind of sell-offs. Look, yesterday, for example, NOT, if we're looking down here in the newsfeed, NOTcoin, NOT, scores 47% daily profit to emerge as the top market gainer. Okay, really, really interesting. So let's kind of break this down a little bit further. Not really much that we can see here on the weekly, other than our kind of, liquidity targets, which are the high and low here. Again, this has got a really, really aggressive run up on a daily scale. If price closes where it is and leaves us this gap, I'd love to see a move into this gap tomorrow to then target this high and this high. All right. Apart from that, we need to remember as well, when we have these big run-ups, I mean, technically you're talking from that kind of low to this high here. It depends how you do it. But, even on this side of the range, you can see the lower 50% here will prove a really tempting place. And we've got this other gap down here. get people feeling bearish, get people moving in the wrong direction, generate a lot of liquidity to step in on the other side, and then just watch this thing absolutely rip, okay? I'm not saying that's going to happen. And again, look, we start closing below this, then again, we see the draw is down here. But I would really kind of be looking and expecting this to hold. You know, again, you can see it wick down into this and then recover it and close within here, then happy days. But we need to move a little bit more granular at the moment, because that's not kind of telling us everything that we need to know. So while we're up here, obviously, like I said, you know, the expectation is to see price kind of correct a little bit lower, but it doesn't have to. You know, if we look at, you know, these price legs, for example, you can see with how bullish crypto gets. If we look at that here, we didn't quite get that correction down here to the 50%, right? But we came very, very close and ultimately held this fair value gap here, which is what we're looking for. So again, that's why I'd be looking on here and saying, okay, well, if we can hold this one on a daily scale, yes, it's slightly above our 50%, but really kind of aligns with that bullish narrative and how hot price action can run. So on a 4-hour scale, really, if we want to take the safe option here, we wait for this change in state of delivery. Yeah, so we do that. You would use the immediate candle, but actually you could use this candle as well. What I like about this one is, obviously, you know, this is the down close candle before price kind of moved up. We want to see this one here closed above, used as an order block, and then we can start to see price kind of drawing back up to here to this previous high. You know, if we're going really super aggressive here, then one thing I really like down here on the 15-minute. Hey, Joshua, mate, how are you doing? What I really like here is this, right? We've had this inversion. Big strong move above it. In about 8 minutes time, that candle's going to close. I'd be looking for this area to hold here. All right, and then from in here you can see how we've got these, nothing really to stop price having quite a fast move higher. You know, again, make sure that you're in control of your risk, that you understand the system, the strategy, the parameters that you need to meet. If that's something that you want to work on, there's something that has worked very successfully for me over the years in terms of looking for patterns. Yeah, is to look for these liquidity sweeps on smaller time frames, meaning that you see a low swept, yeah, and then you look for the high, yeah, that swept the low, and you want to see that closed above. But what you want to see in that move is a lot of energy, right? A lot of impulse, and then you can look for gaps that exist in here for retracements, or you can simply look to draw that line further across and use this to then make and set up your long positions, obviously opposite for shorts, right? But whatever it is you do, I know some people would prefer to set limit orders and bits and pieces at key levels. I really do like to see some kind of confirmation. But at the moment, this is looking like, look, we've had this consolidation here. Price could be ready to pop. But like I said, we would want to see that, you know, this candle close here. It'd be great to get a little retracement into here. Look on the lower time frames for a way to make that pop higher. Just to kind of finish up on here, look, the dollar index is, you know, continuing to be bearish here. Equity markets are moving pretty hot, as we can see. Things are really starting to ramp up in a really kind of big move here on the Friday. Consolidation within here. We can see the DXY starting to pull back here. So it could be setting up really, really nice for risk markets today. All right, guys. So that's it from me. Apart from that, just to say a big thank you to everybody that joined the stream today. I think we had just over 2,000 people with us live. From the Philippines, Carlo, a beautiful country. I got to spend a little bit of time in Puerto Galera, just off of Manila. And some of the most friendly and beautiful people I've ever met in my life. Honestly, such a chill country. Lots of lovely people. Really can't do enough for you. And definitely going to get back there really soon. Hopefully, well, it probably won't be this year now, in truth, but next year, definitely on my travel plans again. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining in today. Remember, do keep an eye as well on the economic calendar. If we look across today, let me just get this loaded up for 1 second. Let's have a look what we've got. So Thursday's the real kind of key thing that comes in with unemployment claims, which is June the 6th. And then we do have like non-farm employment change, employment rate, hourly earnings hitting America on Friday as well. But apart from that, it looks like we've got a little bit of a clearer run from midweek. If we're looking at Wednesday, we've got a couple of bits to be considered. ISM servicing, non-farm employment change as well. Tuesday, we've got JOLTS too. And obviously being aware today, guys, you've got US final manufacturing PMI and ISM manufacturing, right? These are red folder news events. I recommend you use something like Forex Factory or Baby Pips. The calendar's on there, set it to red folder news, because they're typically events that will have a significant impact on traditional markets, equity markets, Forex markets, etc. And that does typically in some way, at least, but often in a big way, affect crypto being, a key risk asset class. All right. So look, wishing you all a fantastic week ahead. We will be live with you again on Wednesday when we'll have our Alt Request Wednesday. If you want any more information, you can come and join us over at the Bird Nest. Loads of different ways to do that. Membership starting from free. Please do come and join us over at Femex as well. We've got a really great community being built over there. And again, you guys get rewards literally just for using it, right? And that's trading on it and then, answering questions, sharing posts, build up as much as you can. Take opportunities to work with these companies that are looking to give you and reward you for your promotions, right? Because in the end, while you're stacking tokens like that, they're all ultimately worth money to you in the future. All right, guys, do have a fantastic week ahead. Blessings to everyone. And I look forward to seeing you all around the